Level 1, the Dropout. You are 19 years old. You grew up in a small diner town in the Midwest, the kind of place with one stoplight and a truck stop that doubles as the social hub. Your mother ran the diner's kitchen for 22 years before her knees gave out. You spent your childhood standing on a milk crate beside her stove, learning to read a pan by sound before you could read a cookbook by sight. You enroll in a culinary school in the city on a partial scholarship, certain this is the beginning of everything. It is not what you expected. The instructors teach French technique like scripture, rigid and joyless, obsessed with plating over flavor. You watch classmates who grew up with money coast through on family connections, while you work a dish pit job at midnight just to afford rent. 6 months in, you fail a practical exam, not because your food was bad, but because you seasoned a classical sauce the way your mother taught you instead of the way the textbook demanded. You argue with the instructor. He tells you that you will never survive in a real kitchen with that attitude. You drop out the next morning. Your mother cries on the phone, not from disappointment, but from fear for you. You take a job in the kitchen of a small, unglamorous French bistro run by a retired line cook named Marceau. He is gruff, exacting, and unlike your instructors, he tastes everything before he judges anything. He watches you work for 2 weeks in silence. Then he hands you a knife that belonged to his own mentor and tells you that you have something that cannot be taught, only sharpened. You cook under him for 3 years, 18-hour days, burns up both forearms, and you fall in love with the craft in a way school never let you. Level 2, the Apprentice. You are 23. Marceau receives a letter that changes both your lives, an invitation from an old friend who now runs the kitchens of a small European royal household, a kingdom called Varenthal. Modest in size, but ancient in tradition. They need a junior apprentice willing to relocate immediately. Marceau is too old for the physical demands. He recommends you instead, on the strength of 3 years watching you work. You fly overseas for the first time in your life with a single suitcase and your mentor's knife. The palace kitchen is unlike anything you imagined. A smoking operation feeding hundreds daily, across state functions, family meals, and diplomatic dinners. Staffed by 40 cooks organized with military precision. You are the lowest rank in the room, assigned to vegetable prep for the first 6 months without exception. You peel and dice in silence, while chefs twice your age shout orders in 3 languages. You do not speak the local language well yet. You learn it through kitchen commands before you learn it through conversation. Onions before nouns. The head chef is a formidable woman named Chef Anneliese Voss, who has run this kitchen for 18 years and answers to the crown directly. She notices you only once in your first 6 months, when she tastes a stock you were asked to discard, and instead quietly kept simmering an extra 2 hours on your own time. She says nothing about it directly. She simply starts including your name on the rotation for more demanding stations. In this kitchen, that silence is the loudest compliment you will ever receive. Level 3, the Taster. You are 26. Chef Voss pulls you aside after a state dinner and tells you that you are being reassigned to a position most cooks spend a decade waiting for and some never receive at all. You will train as one of the royal food tasters, the person who eats every dish before the king does, a tradition older than the kingdom's written laws, maintained quietly beside the modern security apparatus that now also tests every plate. You laugh, thinking it is a joke born of exhaustion. It is not a joke. You realize, standing in her office, that your job now carries a weight far heavier than flavor. You are trained by the outgoing taster, an old man named Brandt, who has held the post for 30 years and lived to tell every story about it. He teaches you to recognize the taste of things that should never be in food. Bitter almonds, metallic sourness, a wrongness the tongue catches before the mind understands why. He tells you the tasting itself is almost never the danger anymore. Security has become too advanced for anything to slip through easily. The real value of the role, he says, is trust. The king must know that someone in this kitchen would die before serving him something wrong. That knowledge changes how you cook every single dish from that day forward, not out of fear, but out of a strange, sharpened devotion. You call your mother every Sunday from the palace's staff quarters. You do not tell her about the tasting duties. You tell her about the food, the produce flown in from 6 countries, the fish pulled from royal waters that morning. She asks when you are coming home. You tell her soon. You do not fully believe it yourself anymore. Level 4. The Sous Chef. You are 30. Chef Voss promotes you to sous chef, the second highest position in a kitchen that answers directly to a crown. You now oversee a full brigade of your own, 12 cooks beneath you, responsible for entire courses at state functions, attended by presidents, prime ministers, and other monarchs. You design a tasting menu for a visiting head of state from across the ocean, blending your Midwest diner instincts with the classical French foundation Marceau once beat into your hands. The king himself requests to meet the cook behind the meal. You stand in front of him for the first time, hands still faintly smelling of thyme and char, and he tells you, simply, that it reminded him of something honest. You do not fully understand what he means until years later. The kitchen politics sharpen as your position rises. A senior chef named Halverson, who has waited over a decade for the position you now hold, resents you openly, undermining your stations quietly in front of junior staff, questioning your methods to Chef Voss whenever the chance arises. You do not fight him with words. You fight him the only way this world respects, through the plate. Every dish you send out is cleaner, sharper, and more disciplined than his. Chef Voss notices. Halverson's resentment does not fade. It simply learns to hide better. You meet a woman named Inez, a sommelier working the palace's wine cellar, during a late-night inventory both of you were assigned to alone. She understands the strange isolation of this life better than anyone you have met. The way palace work swallows entire years and gives back only exhaustion and proximity to grandeur that is never quite your own. You fall for her slowly, over hundreds of quiet exchanges in a cellar lit by a single bulb. Your mother, 6,000 miles away, only meets her through a video call for the first time a year later. Level 5. The Acting Head Chef. You are 34. Chef Voss falls ill during the kingdom's most important diplomatic week of the decade, a summit hosting leaders from 12 nations across 3 days of state dinners. She names you acting head chef from her hospital bed, over Halverson's furious objections, because she trusts your palate more than his seniority. You have 72 hours to plan and execute the most scrutinized meals of your career, each dish analyzed not just for taste, but for diplomatic symbolism, ingredients chosen to honor each visiting nation without favoring any single one over another. You do not sleep more than 3 hours a night that week. You taste every single dish personally before it reaches the tables, the old traditions still alive beneath every modern security protocol. On the final night, a dignitary from a rival delegation collapses at the table, and for one frozen, silent second, every eye in the room turns toward the kitchen before turning toward the doctor rushing to his side. It is later confirmed as an unrelated medical episode, nothing to do with the food. But you understand in that single frozen second exactly what Brandt meant all those years ago about the weight of trust this role carries. The summit closes as a diplomatic success. Chef Voss, recovering, tells you upon her return that you did not just cook that week, you held the kitchen's honor on your shoulders and did not drop it. Inez proposes to you that spring, in the wine cellar where you first fell for her, half joking that palace romance deserves a palace-appropriate proposal. You marry within the year in a small ceremony in the palace gardens, an honor Chef Voss personally arranges, the first time in the kitchen's long history that permission has been granted for such a thing. Level 6. The Mentor. You are 38. Chef Voss announces her retirement after 22 years leading the royal kitchen. Before she leaves, she spends her final year training you directly for the position everyone in the palace already assumes will be yours, sharing recipes passed down by 3 head chefs before her, some of them centuries old, guarded more carefully than the crown jewels in certain circles of this world. You begin training your own junior apprentices the way she trained you, the way Marceau trained you before her. A young cook named Theo, barely 19, reminds you painfully of yourself on that milk crate beside your mother's stove. You hand him a knife on his first-year anniversary, not your mentor's knife, but one you had forged specifically for him. The gesture means more to him than he has words for yet. You remember exactly that feeling. Halvorsen, passed over definitively now that Voss has publicly named you her successor, resigns rather than serve beneath you. You do not celebrate his departure. You understand, more than most, what it costs a person to watch a life's ambition go to someone else. You write him a private letter before he leaves, thanking him honestly for pushing you to be sharper than you otherwise would have been. He never responds. Some doors close permanently, no matter how carefully you knock. Your mother's health begins declining that year. You fly home twice, each visit shorter than you want, torn permanently between 2 families now, one by blood in a diner town, one by devotion in a palace kitchen 6,000 miles away. She tells you on your second visit that she watched a documentary about the kingdom's royal family and saw your name mentioned in passing as the incoming head chef. She cried for an hour, she admits, prouder than she has words for. You hold her hand and do not tell her how many nights you have missed sleep, wondering if this path was worth the distance it put between you. Level 7. The Head Chef. You are 41. Chef Voss retires and the crown formally names you head chef of the royal kitchen, the first person of your background, foreign-born, culinary school dropout, diner raised, to ever hold the position in the kingdom's long history. The press covers it as a small human interest story for a week. Back home, your hometown paper runs a front-page feature with a photo of you as a teenager, standing on that same milk crate. Your mother frames it before she can even finish reading the article. You now oversee an entire royal culinary operation, 45 cooks, 6 sous chefs, a budget that would have been unthinkable to the boy who failed a sauce exam over seasoning. You maintain the old taster's tradition personally, still eating every dish yourself before certain state functions, a custom the modern security team quietly permits you to continue because you have made clear it is not fear that drives you to it, but respect for what the role has always meant. You redesigned the entire royal menu system that year, honoring centuries-old recipes while finally, carefully allowing your own diner-bred instincts to season the edges of tradition. The king tells you it is the first time in decades the palace kitchen has tasted like it belongs to someone, rather than simply belonging to history. Inez gives birth to your first child that winter, a son. You hold him in a hospital wing normally reserved for the royal family itself, an honor Chef Voss, now retired but never far from the kitchen she built, personally requested on your behalf. You think, holding him, of your own mother standing over a diner's stove with you, balanced on her hip decades earlier. The distance between that stove and this hospital wing suddenly does not feel as far as it once did. Level 8. The Trusted Hand. You are 46. A genuine security threat reaches the palace for the first time in your tenure. Credible intelligence suggesting an attempt on the king's life during an upcoming state visit. the details of which are shared with you directly because the kitchen sits inside the innermost security ring. For the first time since Brant trained you 2 decades earlier, the old tasting tradition stops being ceremonial and becomes once again genuinely necessary. You taste every single component of every single dish personally for 11 consecutive days. Security officers stationed inside your own kitchen, cameras on every station, a tension in the air that the younger cooks have never experienced, and you pray they never have to again. The threat is neutralized before it ever reaches the table, intelligence services intercepting the plot 2 days before the visit concludes. But the 11 days change something in you permanently. You understand, in a way you only understood abstractly before, that the plate you send out is not simply food. It is trust made edible, a bond between a kitchen and a crown that has held for centuries and depends, in its final and oldest form, on someone in that kitchen loving the person they serve enough to eat first. The king visits your kitchen personally afterward, something he has done perhaps 3 times in your entire tenure, and says only that he will never forget those 11 days, nor who stood between him and every plate. Your son is 5 now, and you bring him into the palace kitchen for the first time that spring, standing him on a step stool beside your station the way your mother once stood you on a milk crate. Theo, your own protégé, now a sous chef in his own right, teaches your son to crack an egg with one hand while you watch, and you understand, with a quiet ache, exactly how full the circle has become. Level 9. The Legacy. You are 50 years old, head chef of a royal kitchen on the other side of the world from the diner town where you learned to read a pan by sound. You have cooked for kings, presidents, and prime ministers. You have tasted food that could have killed you and never once let your hand shake while doing it. You have trained a generation of cooks who will carry your recipes into kitchens you will never see. The knife Marceau once handed you, worn smooth by decades of use, still sits in your station, passed now in small increments into the hands of Theo whenever he needs it most. The kingdom announces that year a state dinner larger and more significant than any in its modern history, a gathering of nearly every royal house and head of state your small country has ever hosted at once, historians calling it the most important diplomatic event Varenthal has held in a century. The weight of it settles on your shoulders the way the summit once did at 34, except now you carry it with the calm of 20 years instead of the fear of your first crisis. You stand in your kitchen the morning of the dinner, 45 cooks awaiting your word, and you think, for one brief and quiet second, of a boy on a milk crate who only ever wanted to make food that tasted honest. You raise your knife, the kitchen goes silent. You begin.